Hey guys, welcome back to the Aesthetic Sketchbook series. As you all know, I'm actually on vacation right now, so these paintings were done beforehand. Like I had to paint 7 paintings a month before just to keep the channel alive while I'm gone. So halfway through, I was kind of really running out of ideas to paint, so today I'm painting straight from a reference. This photo, I've actually seen it before a very long time ago, and I've always wanted to paint it, but at that point of time it felt too complex. So I saw it and I was like, oh, this looks very me, and I thought I would give it a shot this time. So the first thing I wanted to do was to sketch out the shapes and the objects, and the visible thing would be the house, the highway, and the girl, and the mountains behind it. I think when copying from reference, the first thing you need to do is to match the colors. And the colors that stand out the most first would be the blue roof and the blue car. And from there, that will be like the starting point. What I've noticed as well with the picture is that it had this very warm glow to it. So the black looks almost brown. So I'm mixing a little bit of Van Dyke brown with Mars black, and this is going to be for the first hill behind the house. And then the second one I noticed was a little bit lighter, so I add more brown and less black. And then there's this other slope behind this too, which is a bit more to gray and slightly bluish. So I mixed deep gray with a bit of blue, and the sky was in pale gray. And the top of the sky looks a little bit darker, so I add cold gray on top of the sky, for the top part of the sky. As I've said earlier, one of the hardest thing to do is to match the colors. I think it's a bit of orangey and a little bit gray for the roads and the dividers, so I'm using portrait tone mixed with deep gray. And then there's this little fence on the right side which looks a bit out of proportion right now, which I'll try to fix that later, and I'm gonna paint that fence brown. The silhouette is painted in black and Van Dyke brown, and then I'm just going to cover the road in gray. Okay, so this is just the first layer, which looks as a little bit more watery and light, and it's just for me to get the similar colors to kind of look as close as possible to the reference. And that now that it's done, then I paint the second layer over it. Because I realized it still has that grayish tint, so I added a bit of deep gray to the sky blue for the roof. And then there's this little fence right in front of the house with the lamppost. When working with a reference, I think that it's okay that you don't have to copy it down to a T, And sometimes you can take a reference, change a few things, and make it yours. So if you're not great at drawing just like me, then you can just add something that looks similar, but you don't have to force in all the details that you can't do at that moment. So for the second layer, now I'm kind of working in the background. The colors, I think I've got it quite similar. So now I'm just working on this part. I add more gray and just a dash of cobalt blue, and then I paint the sky. So for me, when working with a reference, I always try to tackle the easiest parts first, which would be the background. I think the bottom half is quite complex, so I'm just doing the sky now, which is quite straightforward. Pale grey and deep grey on top for that gradient. And then this fence here is this brownish shade, so I'm using burnt umber for it. And then for this side, like on the top part of the mountain looks more brownish and the bottom part looks a bit dark, so I mix more black for the bottom half. So as I move to the front, I'm slowly going darker. Personally, I find it very intimidating when I just paint like a dark shade immediately on a blank canvas. So by mapping out the colors first with the first layer, I find that it's much easier to transition to a darker shade. I'm painting the silhouette in Mars black mixed with Van Dyke brown, and I noticed that this car was a little bit lighter, so I'm adding pale gray to my sky blue. And the road here, if you notice, the picture has this kind of like purplish grayish tint to it. So I add a bit of purple pale and portrait tone and pale gray to that part of the curb, and I'm still trying to find the right shade for the road. Sometimes by lightening or darkening its surroundings, then it can make the color appear lighter or darker. So in this case, I've decided to keep that gray, but I lighten its dividers on the side. I am repainting this pole there in Van Dyck Brown with a bit of deep gray, and I notice a little bit of trees on this side of the mountains. So I'm just kind of like drawing this few odd looking pine trees, and I'm going to blur that out later so it looks a little bit more subtle. Now this is a blurry picture and also my favorite topic to paint, but I've also mentioned this technique like a gazillion times in my previous videos. But if you're new here, this is what you need to do when you're trying to achieve the blurry look, is that you need to eliminate all sharp corners and you need to blend everything so that it becomes one, or like in this case what you have to do is you have to use both colors of the part that you're blurring. For instance, right now I'm trying to blur this mountain and the sky, so I take the color of the sky and mix it with the color of the mountain and I paint it in between the lines, and then I blend it both till it kind of becomes one gradient. It's easier if you're using a fine brush for this. For instance, I'm using a size 000 brush, so I'm able to get in all the corners and all the tiny spaces that I need to blur, and you make sure that you kind of blend it for everything you want to blur out, or if you want to keep anything in focus, then you just leave that as it is. Sometimes you might forget what color you use because you're kind of mixing and matching everything as you go, so it's best if you keep like a separate palette where you remind yourself what colors you've used for which object. So now I'm just blending around the silhouette, and you'll start to see that it looks a little bit more like the resolution of this whole thing looks a little bit less sharp and more blurry, and that's what you want. Okay, when working with bokeh, I think I try to find the circles that are the easiest to paint first, and I start from one side and then I go slowly work my way to the other side. So I've noticed there's a little bit of warm glow around these bokeh lights, so I start by painting titanium white, and then I paint orange yellow around it, and then I blend it with yellow mid in the middle, so you get this warm orange glow around the white lights. The rest of this part is quite straightforward. I just add a few more bokeh circles in yellow mid and orange yellow. You might need to paint another layer over the circles if the paint is not opaque, so that the colors will be more vibrant. I actually like how all the white circles have this orange glow behind it because I think it adds a lot of warmth to the overall painting, and also goes pretty well with the color scheme. At the back of this road towards the end, there's a couple of brake lights, so I'm painting that in scarlet red. I'll be honest, I haven't painted with a reference in a while, so this is actually pretty therapeutic. You don't have to figure out what you need to do, what you need to paint, but you're just kind of like following what you see. So there are two more headlights over here. I'm painting them in titanium white, while I also noticed there's this kind of like glow on it on the road, so I'm going to add this orangey thing around it, and then I'm going to drag the paintbrush down. Just kind of like smudge it downwards so you get this glow on the road, and I'm going to repeat it for this headlight over here. I think we are pretty much about to be done. This 10-minute long voiceover is killing me because I think I'm just kind of dragging it along as I go. But anyway, the next thing you need to do is just kind of add a few more final touches. So I'm adding a bit more glow here on the pole with orange, yellow, and yellow mid, and a little bit more here on this side of this fence, and it is finished. I hope you like this painting. Does it look exactly like the picture? Probably far from it, but I'm quite happy with how it turned out. This was something that I really wanted to paint when I first ventured into this, and I found it like, oh, it feels so difficult. But anyway, I hope you like the breakdown of it, and I'll see you again in the next video. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.